You're at your old trusty boat. You call mighty sparrow. I'm in the city of Mardi Gras.
Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast, where we sit down with everyday people who do extraordinary things. I'm your host, Jerome Rand.
Hello and welcome. I think that's the way Matt Rutherford always starts his podcast. Single-handed sailing. So I'm copying you. Shout out to Matt and his crew up there. I'm not sure where they are right now, but I did mention something about their last video that they put out on the last podcast. So another little shout out for you there, bud. He's quite the adventurer, quite the captain, and quite the character on his old podcast. So if you haven't checked that one out, you definitely want to. But today I got a absolutely smashing question from one of my lovely Patreon supporters, part of that family that keeps this podcast ad-free. And I figured, you know what? Let's dive into this one because it is kind of interesting. We're going to be talking about climbing the mast solo, how you get up the big stick without getting hurt, without getting injured, doing it in a marina, doing it out at sea. A few examples from my time out there and how I do it. And then actually, I've got my computer in front of me. We've got a lovely thunderstormy sort of afternoon. I'm finished with work, and I figure, you know what? Let's do a pod. Let's do a sailing pod, even though I'm not in or on Mighty Sparrow. I've been working on boats all day, so we're going to get into that. And with the computer, we're going to be able to kind of check out what Sail Magazine might say about it and see. I'm going to put myself into the position of someone who is trying to look for some gear, and I don't know. We'll just see how it goes when I see some of this sort of stuff online, and if it's anything I would purchase. But before we start the show, like I always say, if you want to support and keep sailing into oblivion, we will need help. We need patrons. We need people to support us via Patreon, or you can also follow the links to do the old one-time donation, PayPal, Venmo, all that sort of stuff. That support, I have to say, really does help, and it keeps me pushing, trying to find cool new people to talk to on the show, as always, and, you know, basically come up with interesting topics and all that sort of stuff that everybody wants to hear about. So definitely give a think about it. Put this stuff out, put in a lot of time on it, and I appreciate more than you will ever know all those people who have supported me for, some of you, years now, and I really do appreciate it. Other than that, we've got the merch line out there. Oh, baby, I love those shirts. I've been, my mom actually is my biggest supporter, and the best part of it is that then I go and raid her closet because she wears mediums, I wear mediums, and then, I sneak them away to other people. So it's this terrible little ploy that I have going, and now it's out of the bag, so I'm pretty sure she already knew I was doing that. So thanks, Mom. Love ya. So the link in the description for all those shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, all that sort of stuff, even tank tops on a few of them. And then, obviously, we have Sailing into Oblivion, the book, available on Amazon. You can check that one out, Kindle, Audible, all that sort of stuff. And the children's book is on the way. It's going to take probably a few more months for the illustrations. But bang, we're going to have a six-book series children's reader. It's going to be great. The initial illustrations that I've seen so far, they cracked me up something fierce, seeing me and Mighty Sparrow sailing around. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then other than that, if you want to reach out to the show, like so many of you do, sailingintooblivion.com, podcast button, and click on Contact the Show. Those go directly to me. Whew, boy, that's a read. That is a read. I couldn't imagine if I had to actually do like proper advertisements for, I don't know, what is it? They always have like, when I listen to other podcasts, they're always doing that hair growth thing, Keeps or Keep It. And then they're always doing Squarespace, and they're always doing, I can't even remember what the other one is. Some sort of Alpha Greens or whatever. I don't know. Oh, geez. I'm so fortunate to have supporters that keep this show from having to ever dive into that, because I have been reached out to, but it just doesn't seem worth it to me unless I could do it like Bill Burr does it. Like his and even Tim Dillon, both of those guys, when they do their reads, they're hilarious. And I know they get they lose their sponsorships now and again because of the way they do them, but it's just classic. It's pretty funny. So anyway, all right, climbing the mast, and we got to do a big shout out to Chris, one of the patrons. He was one who wrote in, and I'm gonna actually let's quote him on this. It's interesting to have the old computer open, the screen behind the mic. Let's see. What equipment do you use to climb your mast? I'm trying to get more comfortable getting up there, especially solo, and was thinking of buying one of those climbing ladders rather than getting hoisted on a bosun's chair, and wasn't sure if they were too gimmicky or whatever. Suggestions? ? All right. Well, with that one, okay, first and foremost, what do I use? I don't use any of that stuff. I've got steps going up my ladder. I've got the old school. They don't flip out or anything like that. It looks like a little tiny triangle. And they go all the way up to the very top. And I do like that. I'm not going to lie. One of the big things with that is speed and ease of access, no setup at all. Case in point, I was sailing through the doldrums or getting close to the doldrums way back in the day on the trip around the world. And there was some lightning off in the distance. It was just getting to nightfall, a little bit spooky. I knew it was going to be a big squall coming in, and I went to lower the staysail. And I released the halyard, and the staysail did not move at all. And kind of looked at it, and I thought to myself, oh, what's going on? And I go up to the mast. Halyard's just dangling there, so obviously something has happened up top. I'm out at sea. The boat's moving, but it's not like rough weather by any means. We're sort of in the calm before the storm. Obviously, it's a doldrum, so not a huge amount of swell. You do have to be very careful when you climb up the stairs of a mast without any sort of harness or safety net. So you essentially really got to pick the times where it's appropriate to do that. Long story short, I sprint up the mast real quick. I find that the halyard has jumped the shiv, and I get up there. I undo it, zip right back down because there is lightning off in the distance. Not ever a good time to be up the mast. And the staysail came down toot sweet, and we were out of that situation. And I also knew that I had to fix that block that was up there, and the shiv and the outer casing had basically bent open. So it was one of those things where had I needed to rig up some sort of system, or even just try and squirrel up to that point, because my staysail goes to about 3/4 of the way up the mast. So that's probably 25 feet, maybe something like that, maybe a bit more. If you're trying to shimmy up a bare mast doing that at sea, no bueno. That's really scary. It's sketchy. It's dangerous. Because I have the stairs, that gives me a little bit more speed, a little bit more confidence. Yeah, I don't know. For me, it was just being able to like zoom up there and zoom back down, take care of the problem, and that sort of did come in handy. So as far as Mighty Sparrow goes, I've got the stairs. And going forward, if I were to ever, bequeath Sparrow off to some young buck with, dreams of circumnavigating in his eyes, or her eyes for that matter, I would look for another boat, and if it didn't have stairs, I would probably install them, because as much of a pain that they can be when halyards get tangled around them and they foul things, and that happens a lot. I mean, there's so many times where I raise my staysail from the cockpit. All the rest of it I have to do from the mast, and I'm back there in the cockpit, and I'm yanking on that halyard, hauling it 1 yard at a time, and it just feels like there's a bit more friction, and so then I have to go all the way up to the mast. I'm getting all wet, not happy about that, and then I find that, the halyard has wrapped around one of those stairs, and it's just such a pain. So, pull it out of there, then I go back to the cockpit, and now I pull it the rest of the way up, and then I'm doubting myself, so I go back up forward, get all wet, and just check and make sure it's okay, and it's okay. whenever I do that too, I'm always like, why anybody would ever want to lead everything back to the cockpit is just beyond me. I know, I think I talked about that before. But that was always one of those things where people had asked that about solo sailing. They were like, well, so do you have everything going back so you can like do everything from the cockpit? No, not absolutely not. I mean, there's a few things. Obviously, I want to sheet in and out the sails, but if I'm changing sail or I'm reefing sail, I'm doing all that up at the mast. That's where I prefer to do it. I like to be kind of where the action is. And I've got mast pulpits, which my Uncle Bill, shout out Bill, always called sissy sticks, which is probably an inappropriate, triggering bit of language these days. But back in his day, that was all okay. Love you, Uncle Bill. And he just launched his boat. Good luck. Hopefully Calypso will have a fantastic summer season up there in New England. But yeah, it's one of those things where I like to be where the action is. I like to be right up there by the mast, and with those mast pulpits, it's nice because I feel pretty secure when I'm up there. I got something to brace against at least. Now let's just step back out of the weeds and get back to the point. So these mast climbers, really, they are pretty interesting because I do remember a time where I needed to, and let's preface this. So the biggest benefits, I think, of steps going up and down the mast is that you have speed and agility. Boom, 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 boom. You go up, boom, 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 boom. You go down, and you can do it in a moment's notice, right? That is, I think, very, very important option to have. Now, at the same time, though, if I have to spend a lot of time aloft and be up there for a while, stairs are not going to be enough. Your feet are going to start cramping up if you're having to clutch on and all that sort of stuff. So typically what I do, and I know it's kind of a no-no, but I'll go up there with my bosun's chair on me, and I have a pretty plush one, just your standard Harkin, whatever, something like that. Shout out Harkin. Sponsor me. Just kidding. I go up there with that, and then I just have like a little, it's about a 5 foot tether, and I can basically take that and, like, let's say I'm working on the spreaders, I can go ahead and tether that off right around the mast back to itself, and that gives me a bit of swing room, but it also allows me to sort of rest up. I don't have to be clinging on the whole time. I can put the weight on it, and I'm using nylon webbing. It's pretty double thickness, and I think there might even, although there probably isn't, a backup of some sort of Spectra or Dyneema line. It's neither here nor there, but basically I had to fix and replace the wiring to, was it VHF Aerial, one of those big fiberglass ones. I kicked it right off the spreader near Cape Horn. Yeah, no big deal. Kicked it. It's just down there, quick little Saturday. And yeah, I jibed on accident. One of the like 5 accidental jibes that Mongo did that I will always blame Mongo for. But I can't blame Mongo for the anger and it's like basically I'm down below. I'm trying to sleep. I'm closing in on Cape Horn, and we accidentally jive. So I am so mad. It's snowing outside, and I could still remember being so pissed off. And I get up there, and I'm like, and I grab that tiller, and I just crash jibe it straight over. Not my best moment by any means. And when I crash jibed it back over with such a fury, I got a mosquito bite. I ended up snapping, or at least removing the VHF aerial and the mount that was not through bolted, but basically threaded into the aluminum spreaders, and obviously there must have been a little corrosion, or the bolts weren't big enough or whatever, but the whole thing came off, and I didn't even notice it at the time because it was right behind the mast or the mainsail, and I go down below, and then I hop in bed like in a huff, and I'm just like, I'll teach you, and I keep hearing the weirdest noise. It sounds like almost like a halyard banging, but not really. It almost sounds like when you would put your ear up to a metal slinky and let that like go down like a flight of stairs or whatever, and you'd hear that the kind of weird noise. And essentially, finally, I go up there and I see that the aerial is dangling by its coax wire. And all I did was pinch it in between some of the halyards because I was like, as soon as I get to the Atlantic, that's what I do with everything. I ended up staying up there till past the Falklands. That was the first time that I had calm enough weather to even attempt that fix. Oh, man. It's so funny. I can put myself right back on those exact days. I don't know if the fact that I ran out of alcohol and there were no even sundowners since like the middle of the Indian Ocean on that trip. But I do have to say, if I would have been like lock, stock, tons of booze and would have lost some of those memories, I'd be upset right now. So sometimes it's just better not to have any of that stuff, right? Anyway, let's not go too far off the beaten track. But that situation when I did have to do that fix, that was a long time. I was up and down that mast probably 7 times. I'd have to read in my book, Sailing into Oblivion, The Voyage of the Mighty Sparrow, available on Amazon. I'd have to read that one to be able to tell you exactly how many times because I documented it. It was so, it seemed to be so insane because each time I had to have more tools or different tools, and you can't take a huge amount of everything up there with you. So, and it was still pretty swelly, but it was nice to have the stairs to be able to go up and down, up and down, up and down. But once I was up there, I needed to be able to clip in, put my weight, use both my hands. That's an essential part of this whole thing. When you're on the stairs, even in a marina, you have one hand on that mast. So you're a one-armed, you're a single-handed sailor at that point, literally. So something to be considered. So when Chris poses this question about, hey, well, these self-climbers, what do you think? Well, I think I've seen a lot of people do them. I've seen a lot of people messing around with them in boatyards, in marinas. There's only one example I have of somebody who basically knew exactly what he was doing. You could tell he had a ton of practice, and that is friend of the show, professional rigger up there in Rockland, Maine, Larique. Shout out Larique. He was on the show quite a long time ago. He's fantastic. He is an absolute gem in the sailing world up there. He's built a lot of Mighty Sparrow's rig, which has stayed up through knockdown after knockdown. So definitely the proof is in the pudding. And Larique has his own self-climbing system, which I believe, and I'd actually have to probably touch base with him about, but I believe it's a system where it's kind of just this block and tackle that I think he connects up to a halyard that's already on the boat. And it allows him, he's got to have, I don't know, probably 150, 200 feet of line. But it allows him to go ahead, hoist that up. So the other end of the pulley, he's got a pretty decent purchase system. And he's able to just pull himself right up in a bosun's chair, up a bare mast, lock himself in up there, and then be able to ease and release himself down. And for me, the simplicity of that system and the fact that it's a kind of do-it-yourself sort of thing, that to me sounds like it would be right up my alley. We're talking about something that has a purchase system where you sit in your chair and you only have to pull on one line, but you're getting like 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 6-to-1 purchase, so it's easy to hoist yourself. And if you accidentally drop it, maybe it has a locking mechanism somehow. Again, I'd have to talk to Larique, but I do know they must have something like that. But it also seems like a pretty basic, pretty easy system. Some of the other ones that I have seen people use involve, these sort of self-locking, almost like stairs, not stairs, but these like little lassos that are connected to the line that you're climbing up. And so you put your weight on it, and then as you move up, you can sort of drag it up, and it will only go up. It won't go down. and then there's another safety line. I think when I start looking at these things, I'll be able to sort of get a better idea. But I've seen people in the marina. They buy these things, they try them out, they struggle like crazy. They almost always come back at the end of the day and they're like, boy, I almost fell the first time I used it. That was pretty scary, that sort of thing. And it happens more often than not. Now, when I talk about somebody like Larique, he's probably gone up 5,000 masts with his little system. So practice makes perfect when it comes to all of these things, and safety being the number one. It really is one of those things where I don't want to judge a book by its cover. Most of the people that I see do this, they do it once to try it out, maybe twice, but they're not out there grinding away every day, making sure that they really have a solid foundation. And I've never heard of anybody using one. I've never been able to sit down and talk to someone who has used one of these self-climbing things out at sea, where, the mast is, rocking back and forth. Oh, wow. Okay, so I just pulled up off Sail Magazine. Shout out Sail. I'm doing a lot of free shout outs here. I do like Sail Magazine. They've always been pretty good to me. Cruising World is also good as well. I used to really, really love Yachting World, and I still do, but I just don't see them anymore. They're just not around. 4 ways to climb a mast solo. Pete Nielsen. Hey, I know Pete. Let's see. Updated May 24th, 2023. Oh, wow. We're getting a picture of what looks to be an actual ladder of some sort that goes up the mast. I have to, move this a little closer. All right. Hopefully, we might get a little interruption on the sound here because I got to move some things because of my old eyes. I can't see as good as I used to. My contacts are full of sunscreen. All right, still rolling. Okay, here we go. Let me just pull this computer. Bear with me, folks. Bear with me. Okay. The sturdy Kinlevin marine ladder felt very secure. To rig a mast ladder, you must first remove your mainsail from the luff groove or track. Ooh, interesting. So that's basically like a ladder that goes up the mast and you feed it up the track. That could be great in a marina. I think I'd want to throw it overboard if I was out there trying to sail. That would definitely be a pain. I couldn't even imagine doing something like that. Okay, the ATN Mast Climber. What's that one look like? Ooh. Well, no, wait. Is that what we're looking at? Very nice. A long time regular boat course. Well, I don't see a picture of it, so I can't do that one. Verdict. Simple system that works well. Oh, okay. The Mast Mate is a simple and effective mast steps to go up the mizzen. Okay, so this is same sort of thing, but this one, instead of an actual ladder with physical rungs, this looks like it's nylon webbing that again would go and be fed up the mast track, but it has basically loops interchanging side to side. I don't know about that. I feel like that would be that might be a little tricky there. I do like the fact that these things are become part of the mast. That makes me feel a little bit better. Because, there's that idea, you're out there and you're on one of these self-climbers that's just a rope, right? And a pulley or whatever. And you're just trying to zoom yourself up there. And all of a sudden, say you lose grip on the mast. And that mast is a major lever at that point. And you hit the wrong little wave set with the swell. And all of a sudden, it's making an arc of 60 degrees. And it starts just whipping you all over the place. That's how you get hurt. That's how you die. So we don't want to do that. So I do kind of like these little mast ladder things that end up sort of staying adhered to the mast. So you're just sort of clinging on to it and going up. That, I don't know. It's interesting. It'd be kind of neat to go and actually be able to go ahead and, okay, Kinlevin marine mast ladder. Interesting. These are all just things you might have to just check out on your own as far as the names of them, because this isn't really looking all good. Okay, here we go. Here's one of these things. The Mast Mate. made of tough 2-inch wide nylon webbing. The Mast Mate is about as simple as a mast climbing device could be. Wow, that's saying a lot. There are 4 standard lengths. Okay, so we can do it for anything. All right, so this one looks like it's one of those where it's got like little foot straps. The Mast Climber is a simple and compact product that gets easier with practice. Yes, see? Preaching to the choir there, guys. Preaching to the choir. These things do always take practice. So it looks like a little tiny bosun's chair, like basically just like a harness built in with that. And then it's got little foot things. And I wonder, tough, functional, and easily stowed. The Mast Mate does the job well. You need to wear sturdy shoes or your feet will feel the pinch on the way up and down. However, 2 topmost steps have stiffeners to make them standing. Okay. That's not too bad. That kind of looks pretty good. That must have some sort of little pulley system so that you can sort of help pull yourself right up. It's got a little tool bag. They're saying it's like from $280 too. Although cost should never really come into play with this one because it's your life. You go up 20 feet above your deck, you fall. That's it, son. You're done. So don't pinch any pennies here. Shout out Jim Bob. He would pinch pennies. Love you, Dad. Okay, Mast steps from $25. Various makers. Now, this one I might have a little bit of an idea about because it's what I do. As seen on numerous salty blue water cruising boats, Mast steps are a fine way to scale your rig without assistance. I've climbed several step-equipped masts, and while I can't say I enjoyed the experience more than any other methods, I couldn't fault their functionality. There are 2 kinds of mast steps. Ones that fold up and out of the way, and the ones that don't. Both offer secure footing, fast route to the top, provided you use the safety. Oh, boo. Just kidding. I know Pete's just covering his ass. He has to. Good on you, bud. Luckily in the podcast world, you don't have to do that. All right, verdict. If you've got a salty blue water boat, I would definitely equip the mast with mast steps. Done. All right. Chris, I don't know, man. I'm kind of in agreement with Sail Magazine on this one. I think it's going to depend, I kind of almost feel like you can't go wrong with the mast steps. I know some people just don't like the look of them. They don't like how they kind of get in the way of things, all that sort of stuff. But functionality, speed, ease of access, those are crucial options to have when you're thinking about going up the rig. Now, if you're not doing a whole lot of blue water stuff, even though catastrophe can happen 5 miles from shore, it's one of those things you got to prepare for the worst, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And I don't know. I don't know. I honestly, I think it'd probably be good to have both. But let's say you're just vehemently against, look at that word. Wow. Must have been all that krill oil I had. Vehemently against mast steps. Like if you just don't want them, you don't like the looks, you hate them, fine. I would think one of them ladders looks good if the vast majority of your climbing is going to be done in a marina or in a boatyard. But when it comes to being out at sea, actually, you know what? I would combine. Because if you had one of the self-climbers, if you had one of these little ladder things, even one of the simple ones, which is sort of nylon webbing and it just has loops, going back and forth all the way up, but it runs right up the mast, right on the mast track, so it just gives your foot a little something to grip onto. You add that to one of these Mast Mate things, which is kind of essentially just a pulley system where you can work your way up. Although I guess, I don't know if that would work because that's got its own foot straps. Well, either way, you could sort of mix the two together. That might provide a little bit of the extra stability for when the weather's not perfect and the boat's moving and that mast is acting like a pendulum on crack cocaine. Because Mighty Sparrow, double ender, full keel, teardrop looking design down below the water line. Yeah, she rocks, she rolls. I can remember even just jumping over and trying to scrape the bottom one time. And when I leapt in the boat, just before, when I was like sort of glancing around for sharks, I was like, oh man, it is so calm. This is great. It looked like a mill pond. I got in the water, and that whole boat was just, every time the boat and the swell sort of lined up, man, it was rocking and rolling all over the place. It was so hard to get back on. So I don't know. That's one of those things you got to take into account for sure. Interesting. I don't know. I'll tell you what. Chris. I would probably go ahead and contact your local rigger, or call up Larique up there in Rockland, Maine. Google it. You might be able to find him on there. And I hesitate to throw a link out to his business, because who knows? He's always so busy anyway. So call your local rigger. Leave Larique alone. Let him be. He's very busy these days. I haven't talked to him in a while. Such a good guy, though. Yeah, call your local rigger. See what they do, because I know a lot of riggers, and they get to these boats in these boat yards, and to be honest, the last thing they want to do is go up on your halyard, because they don't know your boat. They don't know what's going wrong with it. Obviously, something's wrong because they're there. And I think that's why they like to do their own systems. And I'm sure they all have very good systems that they practice a lot, so they know them very well. I can only give you sort of my take from my own experience out there. But, for me, I'm just going to throw it out once more. Steps. It's all about the steps. Oh, we got to pause 1 sec. All right, and we are back. Sorry about that. So now, essentially, I think it would be good to sort of end off with a couple of, or at least one, I may think of another one, horror stories. Those are always entertaining. We all love those, about people going up the mast and things going absolutely horrifically wrong. And the first one comes just from, some old salts of mine, old friends of mine that essentially made little bitty mistakes up there. And these were people working on boats. In one case, it was on a very fancy, very nice, I don't know, it was over 100-foot sailboat, and a small can of some sort of solvent or chemical was placed irresponsibly. It was noticed, but then I believe it was sort of like, it'll be fine. And then eventually it did tip over. And it was probably only 15, 20 feet above, but it tipped over right onto these fancy tinted windows. And we're talking a big boat, 100-footer. Yeah. The tint got ruined on the windows. Windows had to be replaced at the tune of tens of thousands of dollars, I'm sure. And that was a bad day. That was a real bad day. The person didn't get fired because they are awesome, and so that's always good. But it was one of those things where it's kind of the worst nightmare of, like, you're up there, you're doing this work aloft, and every motion, every tool, everything has to be perfect because you don't have the option of dropping anything. Now, I've also heard this one, and this is a bit of lore. I don't know if it's actually true or not, but essentially, again, on some boat, I don't know, in the 60, 70-foot range with nice, beautiful, fresh teak decks. And up aloft, someone was up there, I believe, almost all the way up to the top of the mast, either checking spreaders or polishing or something. But they had a screwdriver with them. I think in the end they were going to go up and check some of the wind instruments up at the top of the mast. But lo and behold, somehow lost their grip on a Phillips head screwdriver of medium size, which then proceeded, as it was described to me, in slow motion, tumbling, and they were able to keep focus on it the entire way down the mast. and it sprung and it went, and it just literally stuck straight into the teak deck like a knife being cast into a floor, and just put a nice old hole on it. It must have fallen close to like 80 or 90 feet. So it picked up a little bit of steam, but it was one of those picture perfect things. And if you could somehow have videoed that, you'd probably go viral, I suppose. But that person did get fired, believe it or not. So that was not a really good situation. So those are a couple little horror stories. And I must say, there have been times where I have been up aloft back in my early days, cutting my teeth, cleaning engine rooms and climbing masts and doing all that stuff in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. There was one day, we were working on this huge, it really was a motor sailor. It was about 130, 140 feet. I can't remember the name of the boat, but it had just so much bright work up aloft. You know, it had the radar things up there that had, you know, piped stainless steel guards around them, all that sort of stuff. And I spent 8 hours aloft with a toothbrush, polish, colonites, and then colonites wax. Oh my gosh. But literally after about 6 hours, my hands and my fingers started like cramping up. And I can remember getting to a point where I kind of thought, wow, I am going to drop something if I keep doing this. So every motion had to be super slow, calculated, never holding more than like one thing at one time. And yeah, it's not the most efficient thing, but it is. It's one of those things where it can be game over if you drop it. Needless to say, like the cost of damage, but I mean, you might hurt somebody too. You know, people are walking around on the deck, all that sort of stuff. So that's definitely one of those sort of nightmare scenarios that you sure do hope doesn't happen to you when you're up there. So my advice on that would always be just be as careful and as cautious as possible. Try not to spend too much time aloft if you don't have to. Maybe do it in chunks because that's always sort of a good thing. Now, on to probably the creepiest, morbidest, that's not a word, most morbid story I've ever heard. And I don't know if this was folklore, an old sea tale, an old yarn or whatever. But essentially, I remember being told this story maybe more than once or twice. And who knows, it could be real. It sounds like it's definitely real. But essentially, a couple set out, and I believe they were crossing the Atlantic. And this, besides it being sort of an interesting story, it's also, like I said, it's a bit morbid, but it does have sort of a moral to the story, or a good lesson be learned, ye. So essentially, something went wrong up at the top of the mast, or close to the top of the mast, and it's a husband and wife, and the husband has to go up, and he does he does the traditional bosun's chair. She hoists him up, and then he's going to be up there for a little while, so he decides to clip in, very much like me clipping in to my mast when I go up there to do a big, long project. So not much I can do about it because there's no one down below to actually clip me off anyway. So essentially, this a little bit of time goes by and something happens, either a stroke or a heart attack or something, to the gentleman in the rigging. And because he is clipped off, and because the bosun's chair is on him, he proceeds to stay up there, and he passes away. And these people are out in the ocean, and there's really nowhere to go but just to keep on going. And from what I understand, and I can't even fathom what this would have been like. I mean, the reality of this situation. You have not only is it your husband, your loved one, you're in distress just because you still don't even know what's going on, but the physical fact that there is a person up there in the rigging, and a person is full of liquid of all different types, and that stuff. Obviously, right? You get the picture. I don't have to say that, not all of him is staying up there. I couldn't even imagine what that would be like. And from what I understand, it was still like another, I don't know how many days until that passage was over. And I do know one of my most burnt in memories in my mind was an old friend of ours down in the Caribbean who sadly hung himself, and we found him. We found him. I don't know, 5 days, something like that, maybe a week afterwards. Holy smokes! I was in the right place at the right time, or you could say the wrong place at the wrong time. But I showed up on my rescue boat, a little tiny Boston whaler. It was on a little cove, right in a tree, right next to the water, and so I was basically grabbed by the police officials at that point, and we utilized my boat, and they utilized my arm to hold the flashlight on the body in the tree, which was probably about 10 feet away from me. But I had to keep the light directly on the person. And not only was he a friend of mine, but just seeing that situation and having to look at it and sort of focus on it for about an hour and a half while they took pictures, did what they had to do before they actually brought him down. And that's an image that's ingrained in my brain for the rest of my life, for sure. And in some ways, I'm kind of, I don't know, it may be kind of weird to say, but I'm kind of glad at least it was like a friend. Regardless of how bad it was that he did that and all that sort of stuff, that's what he had to do. And, hopefully he found peace and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know, staring at a stranger, I don't know. Ooh, that's a lot. That just, wow, the podcast just took a turn. Wow, it took a big turn. But hey, you know what? The reality is people die. Got to watch out. And I think it is valid to at least get dark a little bit when we do have this subject, which is very dangerous, climbing up that mast. I mean, picture yourself. You're this guy, Chris, you got your boat. You're just like, man, I want to climb the mast. I want to do it safe. What's the recommendations? If it's all, rainbows and unicorns dancing in a friendly sky, yeah, he might just think it's like no big deal. Well, guess what, Chris? It's not. Buckle up, guy. You're about to enter a world of hurt, a world of risk. Somewhere above a boat, there lies a bosun's chair. Oh, man. No, it's, it is. It's one of those things that has to be taken very seriously, and you want to make sure no matter what sort of self-climbing apparatus you do go for, and there are a multitude of them. I want to thank Peter Nielsen for letting me, unbeknownst to him, quote some of his stuff on his Sail Magazine article, 4 Ways to Climb a Mast Solo. But it is, you want to investigate, check it out, and then you want to practice with it, and you want to do it safe and sound. I would think, honestly, probably one of the safest things you could do if you are trying any of these is to get an actual climbing harness that you would use in like a climbing gym and have that on you and connect a halyard up, obviously by using a bowline and not by using a shackle or quick release shackle. But have that as your backup so that you can have that. You got somebody there with you for the first time. You use the self-climber. All they're doing is making sure that if that thing fails or you screw it up, they're still going to be able to catch you. That's probably the best advice I've ever given in the history of this show. That would be my advice there. And just try it and then practice it. Make sure you're really good with it and go. The other bit of advice would be to always make sure if you're doing this offshore to pick the opportunities. There were plenty of times where I just had to wait until the swell calmed down. Then I knew it was safe to go up. The other thing is that chances are if it's really rocky and rolly and you go up there, you're going to drop something. It's not going to work out in your favor. You're going to tire yourself out. I mean, when I talked to Elliott Smith about his experience in the Indian Ocean when he was trying to get the forestay and all that sort of stuff on there, it was really swelly, and he regrets doing it because he was like, man, it was just, we lost all the parts, and then there was nothing I could do. And it was one of those things where, he was in a pretty precarious spot, so I feel the urgency of like, I want to fix this now, like right now, because the next monster gale it's breathing down my throat sort of thing. But if you have the opportunity to just wait it out a little longer or get to a place where it's a little calmer, then definitely do that. You have to pick and choose. Going aloft is definitely dangerous. And if that mast feels or looks like it's swinging from down on the deck, I guarantee you get about halfway up that sucker and you're going to be like, oh my goodness, this is unreal. Get me back down. Let alone the very top. I've only been to the top of my mast probably a handful of times out at sea in my life. I go up to the spreaders quite often. The view's pretty good and I feel pretty safe there, but that's only about 20, 22 feet up, if that. Top of the mast on Sparrows, 40, 45. And that feels literally like Mount Everest sometimes, especially if it's rocking and rolling. I remember hearing an old story about Peter Blake, Sir Peter Blake, one of the greatest round-the-world sailors there ever has been. Just a true old salty dude. And he, I believe, I don't know what boat he was on. I think he was with Knox Johnson, but he had to go up the mast. And he was up there for a long time, and it was rough. And that was the only time he ever looked a little green behind the gills, as they used to say. Peter Blake probably doesn't get seasick very often, but I think after swinging around on a huge old race boat mast in the Southern Ocean, that might have got him. Other than that, I don't want to get too much into, climbing a mast or using a bosun's chair with a partner, although it probably would be. That's definitely maybe a future show side note or full-on topic, but I think we've covered probably the important stuff when it comes to solo mast climbing and all that sort of stuff. I think it's been a long day. But this is fun. I'm so glad. Thank you so much, Chris, for sending in this question, because this is a great subject. And I gotta say, if anybody else out there has like specific things like this, man, it will make my day. I mean, I am surrounded by Hobie getaways, Pearson Ensigns, butterflies, kayaks, paddleboards, all that sort of stuff. So that's where my mind is at this point. And even though I glance at pictures of Sparrow, it's easier for me to come up with sort of offshore and big boat sailing sort of content when I'm on the boat. And now that I'm up here in the great state of Northern Michigan, it's a little different. And I don't know. So if you got any stuff, send it to me. I'd love to talk about it and keep a little, I want to keep a mix. I want to get some interesting new people. I want to get some old school sailing stuff. Just go for some topics. All that sort of stuff. Keep the summer rolling on and keep everybody happy. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the support. And remember, when you're climbing a mast, take it seriously, because it is very, very dangerous. But boy, the view is spectacular. Thanks for listening. Till next time.